So now we're 2 days after the pour. I think it's time to start revealing what it looks like behind our shuttering. And as I've said in previous videos, our design wasn't done perfectly with Ecobrix dimensions in mind. Our architect did do a fantastic job in adjusting it within the parameters of our planning permission to achieve a better fit. And that is why we have got so much shuttering, is because we've probably got more cut blocks than what you'd normally have if you were planning to use Ecobrix from the start. So without further ado, let's start lifting the first bit of shuttering, which is our windowsills, which you saw in the video. We've filled these up to the top, then Dad was coming along and screwing these down. We'd then fill and tamper these, so I'm hoping for a nice smooth finish up to the bottom. Not quite sure how hard these are going to come off in the frost, but yeah, let's get to it. It's now safe to put stuff on top of the blocks. Now they're filled with concrete, we're not so worried about stuff falling down to the bottom now, which is, yeah, not too bad at all. I'll bring the camera in so you can see. So yeah, we have got quite a full cavity there. Now that's something where I could literally just mix up a tiny bit of sand and cement myself and just finish that off, but that shows a nice packed window ledge cavity that is solid. Yeah, pleased with that so far. So I've just lifted the next windowsill, and this is sort of like the finish that I wanted to achieve. And you can see that is literally filled right to the top. You know, that is exactly what I want to see. Although we haven't got it on that one, that's probably more to do with my ability in the concrete pour and the filling. So yeah, happy with that one. So this one we've got slightly shallow end to a slightly fuller end, but yeah, pleased with the fill on our ensuite window sill cavity. Yeah, really pleased with the dressing room window fill cavity as well. So it wasn't a complete leak-free pour. We did have a number of leaks, and they were all associated with the 170 internal blocks that we're using for our stairs. Ellie and I, these were the blocks that gave us the biggest concern prior to the pour, along with the aspects such as like the kink, which in the end didn't turn out to be a problem at all. We found when we were laying these blocks, as I've mentioned in previous videos, we found them harder to lay because they weren't as uniform, they didn't feel sort of as tight, and lo and behold, that did transfer into leaks appearing. But when I say leaks, they were absolutely minimal. The largest one we had is here that you can see on the camera, and all that was needed was a mate to just come along with a trowel and just push the mix back in, and it basically self-healed. You know, it blocked itself. The only other spot where we had a bit of a bigger leak is my mortar bed down here. Failed, Lord knows, because as you've seen I've put plenty of muck down, but we just had a small leak out there. There was other smaller leaks, like there's a tiny little one there. I'll bring the camera in so you can see, but these leaks, it was more like cement, the concrete mixed water rather than aggregate, and you'll see that all of them have pretty much self-sealed. So the actual worry we had with these blocks, yes, it did transpire that they did leak, but we're talking they leaked a minimal amount, and the finish, I mean, we've got an absolute rock solid wall there. So it wasn't completely faultless pour, but the faults were exactly where we thought they would be. So there was a number of areas on the build, apologies for the
wood chipping background, there was a number of areas that did give Ellie and I areas of sort of like concern. The cut blocks at the kink, how they would hold themselves with the concrete pour. I was concerned of the blocks at the rear of the stair walls where we've cut the inner leaf of the block. You need to brace the outer edge. I was concerned with those. And then lastly, Ellie and I had concerns with the blocks that surrounded our steel. So you'd have seen in the sway frame installation video, we were actually cutting the inner leaf out completely. So you were basically just finished with a U-shaped section of block, just treating it like shuttering and putting them round the steels. So this is the next area that gave us sort of areas of concern where we've put extra shuttering in place. So yeah, much like the windows, without further to do, we'll take this off and reveal what it looks like underneath. One moment. So we're going to use because we reuse all these screws, we want to put them in something. Obviously they're not going to fit back in the individual little boxes they came in. So Mum and Dad have kindly cleaned out a sheep lick bucket, which is quite nice, so I can just literally unscrew them and drop them into there. Okay. So that's it for that. Yeah, no issues there. Nice. I'll just whip this outer corner off so you can see what we've got left.
So there's not a single leak behind that shuttering. Blocks don't look like they've moved at all. Hopefully this is a sign of the rest to come. And you can see we've got the steel completely surrounded. We had some comments about there being a cold steel within the Ecobrix, but hopefully you can see now, like, this steel is still in the insulated like concrete. There's not as much insulation on the outside edge, but this won't be causing a thermal bridge because it's internal. If this was then running outside, then yeah, we're then going to allow that heat that's transferred into the steel to creep out, causing a thermal bridge. But this will all be encased in the heated concrete. And also, I know people have probably read the comments, but there was a number of concerns about the design of the steel, that this cross member beam should be on top of the uprights. This cross member isn't holding a load.
All this cross member is doing is actually tying in the two uprights. The cantilever sits over this steel, and this cross member is actually just floating in the floor void of our first floor above. So there's actually not anything, there's no load sitting on top of this steel. So it's, I completely understand the concerns, and I probably didn't explain it good enough in the first video, but there is no worry about the sheer strength of the bolts. No load is sitting on top of this. It's basically to stop those steels and those walls swaying out, which hopefully now you can see that they're encased in concrete. I'd be incredibly surprised if we've got, you know, an inch of movement in them. So just to clear that aspect up for you.
So as I've said before, we've got more shuttering than what you would need if your build was true to Ecobrix dimensions. But what shuttering we did put in place is basically what we followed from the Ecobrix manual.
Yeah.
We've used, as you can see, 18mm OSB board, and you fit that to the Ecobrix blocks by just using a 6mm, 60mm long wood screw. The Ecobrix instruction on shuttering the blocks actually utilises an 8x4 sheet with no wastage. This is obviously incredibly efficient in a number of ways, but it's also very handy for us to stack this shuttering away, taking up minimal space, and we'll reuse these sheets when it comes to do our second pour. Here I am removing the shuttering of the first kinked wall section. Just to give you an idea, this is what it looked like prior to pour. So it was quite a void with quite a volume of concrete to fill. Now obviously when we were pouring the concrete there is quite a volume and weight to it, so it was causing the walls to vibrate, but the shuttering held everything in place perfectly and hasn't displaced the alignment of the kinks at all.
So this is the other side of that kink, where we could only support one side of it. We couldn't do it like the other kink because here is where the 170 blocks for the stair walls tied straight in. So we were reliant on this batten here, not only wedging in the 170s, but also securing the other side of the kink. The pour, it did wobble ever so slightly, but it hasn't moved at all. So let's take the battening off and see what it looks behind, and hopefully this will be a success. Just doing this simple method will support the kink on the next lift. Good. Pretty pleased with that. Pretty bloody. That is looking bob on. On the half blocks there's a tiny bit of seepage, but nothing. And they haven't moved at all. Yeah, really pleased with that. Really pleased.
So here's a close-up view of that join, and as you can see we've got a minimal amount of 365 block that's cut on the angle to fix to, and also that inner face of that 365 block is actually cut out for these 170s to butt into.
Spot on, spot on.
And here is a view of the other side, And it's just worth noting that these 170s aren't screwed into the 365s. They're purely butted up to. So to see that there's been minimal movement down the line, they're still butted up as tight as they were the day we laid them, is really promising for the future. So I've already started removing the shuttering around the 170 blocks where we had the small leaks occur. Found no horrors so far. This is the last bit of shuttering, so hopefully this will continue on the same trend. Use my screw bucket first. Okay, not looking bad at all. The blocks haven't shifted. There's a few more leaks, and that's not a true male or female end, that's a cut end there, so you might expect a little bit of leakage there, but in all, they're looking good. Also, Ellie and I realised that we expanded foamed far more joints than what was actually necessary. Believe it or not, there were some gaps that Ellie had missed to expanding foamed, which she admitted, had she seen them, she would have quite happily jammed the nozzle of the foam gun in there and filled it up. And those missed gaps didn't leak at all. The shuttering boards could be passed through one of our downstairs windows, which made it incredibly easy for stacking later on. And weirdly, almost a year to the day, but in a slightly different position, I was doing exactly this, but passing the floor joists of the bungalow through the bungalow window. So to summarise, we've learnt a few things, and one of that is to trust the shuttering process. Our method of half filling the wall units to 3 courses and then topping off at 6 courses was a very controlled way, and I'm sure that's helped in resulting in no movements or disruption. We don't need to foam half as many joints as what we did do previously, as there was literally minimal leaks from gaps surprisingly missed by Ellie and her foam gun. We didn't mention this in the pour video, but we're also going to apply a 3-inch delivery hose to the pump, which Craig said will sort of stop the splurting application of the concrete into the block and allow it to be more controlled. Although the way it was going into the blocks didn't actually affect them at all, this will just make it a nicer job for us all. So a couple of things to finish off. The pour went incredibly well, and that has now been backed up by this shuttering reveal, where the blocks have shown Ellie and I that they really do perform how they're supposed to, and it has just given us a boost in confidence for the next lift and the next build. And lastly, thank you all for watching and having an interest in our build. Our next video is going to be a little experiment with the blocks, so hopefully you'll join us then and see how we get on.